cards that I brought with me, well, my Fool for Tarot deck, along with this Roses, Dust, and Ashes Oracle. I did have a really meaningful reading with this while I was at the Paracon, actually. I had gone to the psychic gallery reading. I went in with the expectation that she wasn't going to call on me, you know, that her readings would be for other people, and I was fine with that. I wanted the experience nonetheless. I did not get a personal reading, which again, fine. I didn't expect it, but of course, you can always hope. So I went back to my room to have my snack, and then I pulled my ducks out and I did just ask, like, hey, was my dad there? And so as I was shuffling, there was one that was wanting to jump out. It was the King of Cocoa, or the King of Cups, which is my dad's signifier card, answering the question, was my dad there? So, of course he was. And then in answer to why he didn't come through with a message for me, I got the Four of Onions, or the Four of Pentacles, which I often see as holding things, you know, close to the chest. And that was in keeping with the sense that I already had as I was seated in that room, where I was like, I don't think he would come through, because my dad was a very private person. I know he would have something to say to me, but he would not want to say it in front of a bunch of strangers. And I also just saw this as like that humility of his, of just kind of keeping it in, letting someone else go before him, because the messages that were being delivered were really important for the people to hear. And not that it wouldn't be important for me, but like, there was some tremendous closure being given that these people would not have had otherwise. And so what I also took away from the four was that sense of, you know, numerically, stability, you know, like on solid ground. Ultimately, I know I'm okay now. And I know my dad knows I'm okay. And I have a lot of strength and support within myself and without me, you know, with family and friends, and I've done a lot of healing, and you know, it's never going to be okay that he's not here. It's never going to be all right. I'm always going to miss him to the depth of my core. And of course, there are moments where this circles around and I'm, you know, brought to my knees again. But it's just, you know, it's not happening with the frequency like it did before, now that I kind of moved through the more acute phase of it and everything. And so, you know, my dad died a good death, as the Victorians would have called it. There was closure. There was nothing that remained to be said. So we were good. You know, everything ended on like stable footing. And so I don't think there was anything that he would need to say to me, because I'm not going to be okay otherwise. You know what I mean? And so I think that was it. And so it's just giving that prioritization to others who really needed to hear it more, because I know what my dad would have to say to me. There's a knowing there, and I know he is there. I sense his presence in so many ways. I see the signs, and speaking of, I would just like to validate this for anyone out there who believes in signs, because this psychic was asked about it, and someone just said, like, how do you know your loved one is sending a sign? And what if you haven't seen any? And she just said, they're there. Whether you're seeing them or not, they're sending signs all the time. So you need to be mindful, and you need to be open-minded. You need to be like paying attention. And it does help if you're asking for something specific. And then as far as like how you know if it's a sign, it is just that knowing. Because you can tell anyone else about it and it would probably sound like nothing, but like it's hard to explain. In the moment, you just know. And so I loved the way that she put it, where she was like, there are times you see a bird, and then there are times you see a bird. There are times you find a coin, and there are times you find a coin. And so I don't know how better to explain it to you if you haven't experienced this, but please do keep your eyes open and pay attention, because it happens. And, you know, as she said, it's like it typically will happen in unusual ways. Birds with unusual behavior. I won't get into my list of signs, but I'm just telling you, I've got them, but they're always accompanied with this like knowing, where it's like, it's not every time I'm in the US and I see a cardinal that I think that's a sign. No, but there were times I saw cardinals and I'm like, that was a sign. That was weird. That was very unusual. Or with finding coins. It's just, it's a thing. So I wanted to supplement that reading with this oracle deck and just say like, okay, so then now that I know my dad was there and like this is why he didn't come through with the message through the medium, but like what would he have wanted to communicate to me if he did? And I drew this. So I'll share a bit from the guidebook, give you a sample of what this guidebook is like. Weeping angels were a popular choice for grave memorials because they were associated not just with mourning, but with contemplation. These graceful giants evoke a sense of sadness and loss, making them a fitting symbol for the departed. Sorrow can lead to personal growth and transformation, as individuals often reflect on their experiences and learn valuable lessons from them. This sentiment is not much comfort, however, when you're right in the throes of grief. Are there signs and triggers around you that remind you of sorrowful things from your life? Often when we are badly hurt, we get stuck in the grieving process and find ourselves over-examining our own role in attracting bad luck or even tragedy. We try to imagine ways we might have been able to steer our lives into a better place. Rather than focusing on the past, try to look beyond the signals into the new horizon that awaits you. And I'm like, yeah, that is what he would say, because he knows that I'm okay, but he knows that when I'm not, it tends to be when I am lingering in the past, and maybe I'm wanting too much to see a sign, and that's kind of clingy of me, where it's like, you know, letting go. It's not letting go of him as if just like not remembering, but just in the sense of like being able to move forward. You know, I'll never move on from, you know, what he meant to me and what his loss has meant, but, you know, but I can move forward with my own life in celebration of what he meant to me. And using all I've learned from the grieving process, as the guidebook said. There's been so much, and I've been very reflective of that. And so, yeah, I feel like the message would have just been like, okay, yeah, you've been learning your way through this, feeling your way through it, and just keep doing what you're doing, and don't be too sad, and don't get too trapped in the past. I thought that was nice, and it reminds me of another thing that this Sarah said, who was the medium at the event. I believe she said something to the effect of like, sometimes our loved ones don't come too near to us because they know it makes us cry. I'm pretty sure that that's how she said it. Sometimes they don't want to come too close because they know it makes us cry. And it was so interesting to me because I had just been having a conversation about grief with someone else, you know, who had lost a parent. And I was kind of developing that thought in my mind, like prior to hearing this woman say it. Her saying it was just kind of confirmation of it, because I wondered if like, oh, those times that it does cycle around and I feel like, oh my gosh, my dad is just so present in my mind and heart, and it's weighing me down again, and it's got me crying again. I was already wondering, like, is that because, like, I feel like he's like always there, or will be there if I, you know, summon him. But I mean, I think he's also got an afterlife to live, you know, and I don't want to hold him back from that. I don't want him to feel tethered. He's lived this existence. I feel like he's got a job to do over there. He's got other people to go visit and comfort. And so I want him to have a great afterlife. But that being said, I feel like he's also able to do that and still be here for us. But I just wondered if the times that he's really close, if that's when the grief circles around again, because I'm just feeling that presence really closely, and it was making me wonder, is that a deterrent then? Does that make him want to like stay a little distant sometimes because he doesn't want to make me sad or any of us sad? And so for her to say that, I just thought, wow. So anyway, I say all this in case it resonates with any of you, if you've had any experiences or thoughts like this. I would love to hear about it in the comments if you're willing to get vulnerable and share something like that with me. No pressure, obviously, but I'm here for it. I'm making the space for you if you ever need to talk about something like this, because it's something that's, touched me deeply, and I like to think about and talk about. I think talking is important. So thanks to all of you, whether you've wanted to hear this or not, for letting me talk it out, because it's all part of the process. But I guess like on this topic of like spirits and afterlife, not everyone believes it. I do. I was raised Catholic, and I say it that way. I really don't know how else to say it, because I feel like to just say I am Catholic, I don't know. Am I anymore? I don't know, because it's so much of my spirituality has just evolved beyond the bounds of what's prescribed within organized religion. And I've come to question and just flat out walk away from certain aspects of organized religion, certain rules that I feel were put in place long after the fact by people who were probably centuries, if not millennia, separated from when Jesus walked this earth and taught what he did. Whether you think Jesus is who he said he was is one thing, but I don't think anyone denies that he was a great teacher. And what he actually taught isn't always in keeping, for me, with what the church became. Like, I don't know that the church is what he intended. And so that's where I like to pare things down and just like kind of get closer to the source. And even the source, okay, if I were to say the Gospels in the Bible are a source, well, when were they written? I mean, they may have been written quite a while after the time of him, and by other people, just using the name of one of the disciples. So it's like, that I know there's been research done into it, and so there, maybe there is like evidence for timing and authorship for anything, but whatever, I'm not getting into that because I haven't really delved into that research myself. But I just know that, like, even if you wrote something down right after the fact, if you just got off the phone with someone, would you be able to transcribe the conversation you just had 5 minutes ago? With this brain? Hell no. Hell no. I could paraphrase. I have been paraphrasing as I'm saying things that I heard spoken at the conference, but like, I wouldn't be able to say what I just said 2 seconds ago. So not word for word. So, it's like with that, I'm like, I've always taken the Bible like with a grain of salt as far as like what is said. Also bearing in mind that it's been translated, and translated from a very specific time period. And so there's a frame of reference that's shifted with now. So it's almost like not even taking into account the actual language, just the way things would be phrased and what would be talked about almost needs a translation time-wise, to make it relevant to current society. If you read these things, you can definitely see the parallels. That's for sure. And I think that that's all part of it, is like when you look at it, trying to see what you can overlay with now, but like not taking things as like verbatim fact and having someone else's translation of it as it might be interpreted through a sermon at a service or mass, not taking that as, pardon the expression, gospel, because it's like, I don't know. And I think that there are some things that in the Bible that are stories that we can learn from. Jesus loved to speak in parable. He loved to make things cryptic AF that even his own disciples were like, huh? What do you mean? Why can't you just say it straight, man? And then he's like, You still don't get it? You don't get it? So I just have to say that for a previous Lent, like several years ago, I got this little like pocketbook of Gospels, and it was just the Gospels from the New Testament. And I just sat and read them to myself, like a little bit each day through the course of Lent, leading up to Easter. And that was really game changing for me, because I was at a point where I was questioning my Catholicism, and I'm like, am I even Catholic anymore? I don't think I am. Does this mean I'm leaving the church? Does this mean I've renounced my faith? Like, what's going on? And then I had this experience just reading the Gospels to myself, and interestingly, it brought me back closer to Catholicism, at least to the faith of it, not the organized religion of it, not the church and rules that has been built around it for the last 2,000 years, but like the core of what Jesus was teaching. Some of the mystical experiences to be had in those stories. I was looking at everything in a different light, because it was just me reading it without a gatekeeper, without a priest giving a sermon about it at Mass, and telling me what to think about that. And I'm not meaning to like crap on church and people of the cloth. Oh my gosh, if you have a really good priest or minister or any sort of like faith leader who can really bring things alive, I mean, that's very special. If you find someone like that who can really be that effective translator and put it in a way that like really resonates with you, then that is just like, oh, that is enlightening. And we do need those teachers. We do need those guides. That's different. A guide and a teacher are different from a gatekeeper. So I am talking about from, as far as anyone who is saying something and claiming this is it. This is how it goes. You must do this. You must do that. That gatekeeping, I don't have any space for. But like this personal experience that I had with the Gospels brought me back to appreciate the elements of what I do observe during a Mass service, or just within the Catholic faith itself, that does still resonate with me. And so even though I think I'm still like very much like outside the bounds, and I'm sure that there's someone who would point at me and say like, no, you're not Catholic. I'm in this space of like not saying I am, but also where I'm not renouncing it either. So for me, it's just easier to say I was raised Catholic. And so I'm more spiritual than I am religious. But some of my spirituality is still in the context of that faith tradition that I'm familiar with. And part of the reason is because I feel I am more familiar with it. I feel more comfortable with it. I guess I feel more comfortable sometimes running with something like that than something from another faith that I wasn't raised under, because it feels less like appropriation to me if I just keep it within what, I was educated under. So, but it's not to judge. It's not to say that like anytime you take something, because I'm all for cherry picking. If you take something from another faith, I'm not meaning to say like you're appropriating. I'm saying like for me, if I haven't really like done the research to feel like I'm taking something on in a way of truly understanding it and truly revering the faith tradition that it comes from, I just feel a little less comfortable doing that, and I feel a little less responsible handling that. And so I just feel like, okay, Christianity is more my wheelhouse where like religion goes. So like those images. So like tiptoeing into the sphere of goddess through the Virgin Mary, even though Mary was not a goddess. She is exalted as such in certain ways. And I like using her as a symbol for that sort of earth goddess, mother energy, if that makes sense. So anyways, that's just kind of the way that I'm navigating it. And I don't have any hard and fast way of approaching this. I don't have any set beliefs one way or another, other than the fact that like I do believe in something. Kind of like with seeing the signs, for me, it's just sort of an inner knowing. There's something more there, but I don't pretend to know what that is or what to call it. You could call it anything. So if I label things in the Christian terms like God, again, it's just because that's the faith tradition I'm from, but like I acknowledge it as source, whatever anyone else would want to call it. It doesn't matter. I don't see it as a bearded man in the sky. It's like this source energy that I think everything kind of comes from, and that we have this energy that must go somewhere when we die. And so that's the extent to which I believe in afterlife and what form that takes. I mean, it's just always like the search through the things I read and meditate on, but totally knowing that I'm not going to know until I'm dead. Or I won't know because maybe I'm dead and this really is the end, and that's the end of consciousness. And then in that case, I won't know what I don't know. I won't know anything at that point. I will cease to exist. So whatever, that's how open I am about all of this. I would never pretend to say I know anything and that anyone else is wrong. I'm just trying to like offer you some context to where I'm coming from about this next thing that I just wanted to talk about with my visit home, which is really special to me because it was Ash Wednesday and the beginning of Lent as I was visiting my devout Catholic mother, and all of us kids were raised Catholic, and you know, some of us have gotten loosey-goosey with it. I don't go to Mass unless I am visiting home and going with my mom. My husband was also raised Catholic, but he doesn't attend either. But you know, he has faith. But like none of us, and my siblings included, are like totally dogmatic about it. And I think a couple of my siblings have even like fallen off, you know, regular attendance. Like they did it for their children. But then now that the children are grown and making their own choices, and some of them, you know, are deciding, yeah, no, not for me, whether they're agnostic or otherwise. You know, it's just kind of how it's become. But I feel like there's still like a general belief in something that is still like a tie that binds us all together. And when I am with my mom, I definitely like observe my spirituality more within that Catholic context out of reverence for the faith, and the beauty that I do think it possesses. You know, the corruption and everything aside, it's like that shit happens in every field, you know, so whatever industry, whatever line of work you're in, it's going to happen. So like, why would it be any different within the clergy? So that's an institution. I'm not talking about the institution. I'm not talking about the religion. I'm talking about the faith that underlies it, that sourced all of this. I have reverence for that. And I do have reverence for some of the tradition that emerged from it. And I have reverence for my mom and my dad, who deeply believed and lived the example. And they didn't preach at us. They lived the example, and that's how they set the example. We could just observe them, and they lived a good life, and we have learned how to follow suit, and we could do that without someone, you know, telling us what we shouldn't do. So I'm really grateful to my mom and dad, as devout as they were, and as much as they wanted us to like, you know, stick with the church and marry through it and observe its tenets, you know, the 10 Commandments and so forth. They didn't force it down our throats at home. They made us go to Mass and go through the religious education program, but like otherwise, again, they lived the example. They weren't hypocrites. And with that sort of authenticity, I will always be proud of coming from a line of Catholics, because I know that's how my parents felt. They were raised by their parents, and out of respect for my family lineage in that way, it'll always have that special place in my heart. So yeah, I don't think I could ever just fully renounce it in that respect. So anyways, being with my mom, we actually had every intention of going to Ash Wednesday, at least a service to get ashed, if not like the full Mass. But then she received a phone call from an old friend. He was an army buddy of my dad's, and he recently lost his wife. So she was not about to rush this person off the phone, which I completely understood. So we didn't make it to our service. But we at least did go to McDonald's for a fillet of fish to make sure we didn't eat meat. And, real devout stuff like that. But no, seriously, one thing I decided to do for Lent was, because I was seeing it advertised. I had heard of this app before, advertised by Mark Wahlberg. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's called Hallow, Halllow. And again, often advertised by Mark Wahlberg. I don't know if he's the one that actually started it or if he just like did it in collaboration. Now Chris Pratt has joined on, and so it's fun. There's a lot of people that they've wrangled up, members of clergy. Some might just be voice actors as well, or film actors like themselves. I just listened to a thing the other day through the app. It was Gwen Stefani talking about her Catholic background and faith. And anyways, there's a free trial period for it. So I thought, okay, I'll try this because they have a Lenten challenge. And so it's called Pray 40 on this app. And every day there is something different, and it tends to be a different person each day of the week. But that person, like say they do a sermon on Sunday, they'll be the same person each week. Mark and Chris, because I'm on a first name basis with them, they do Fridays. There's another priest that will do Saturdays, and so whatever. They all kind of have their own thing going, but there's a common denominator, a common thread woven all the way through it, where they're following this book called The Way, because apparently before it was called Christianity, it was called The Way. And they've been tying it in with the story of Takashi Nagai, who survived the atomic bomb in Nagasaki. He had converted to Catholicism, and his is just a powerful story. So there are bits of that are relayed, if not every day, almost every day. And it just kind of gives this nice consistency through the 40 days of Lent. And so the app sets it up like it's your challenge. And if you're doing it every day, then you get, your 3, 4, 5 day streaks going. And it's a whole thing though, like through the app. I do have my phone here to show you, here's the thing for the challenge that's on there. So you just hit play, you get a little quotation, but they've got featured prayer, there's morning routines, you're recently prayed instead of recently played, Lent prayers, Lent music. There are moments of silence, maybe just with music in the background where you can meditate. Rosaries, you could do the Bible in a year, catechism in a year. I mean, it's just like you could get as engaged with it as you want to, and get as probably dogmatic with it as you want to, if you really want to get into. I mean, if we're talking catechism, that's kind of hardcore. But like in the morning we get sleep Bible stories. I mean, it might not be everyone's thing to get super biblical about it and everything, but I just feel like I haven't explored the other features of it. Like if I wanted to try a morning prayer, I do love praying the rosary. That's a part of my background that I have held on to. And actually, I never even prayed it when I was younger in church going regularly. I first started that practice in the last few years as my spirituality has expanded beyond that. But something just brought me back around to venerating Mary and just learning more about the history of the rosary that goes before Christianity, just prayer beads in general, and that veneration of an earth mother, and how that carries over into the rosary today. It's really neat. I mean, there's kind of some pagan roots to it. I remember how I came around to it. It was because I heard Don Michelle talking about the Way of the Rose. That was a very influential book for me to read, as was Mary Magdalene Revealed. I feel like I read both of those around the time that I read those Gospels on my own. And then in 2020, a friend of mine who's a Methodist minister that I met while volunteering at the cemetery, that I loved in London and used to always walk through. He and his wife were awesome, and we would like deliberately schedule our volunteer shifts together so we could hang out. They're about my age, very cool. And anyway, so my friend Jonathan, who's the minister, he had started work towards a PhD, and his doctoral thesis was centering on like building community, but one way in which he did it, because it was COVID and people couldn't actually meet in person, he started Ignatian meditation over Zoom. So I was one of the first group members, and then it like grew from there, but still remained a fairly like small, intimate group, and we continued over Zoom. Honestly, they're still going. I have ended it myself this year just because it was getting harder to maintain on a weekly basis, and I just feel like, you know, it had its season, and I know what I've learned from it, and I just have, you know, reasons for kind of moving on from it. But just really briefly to let you know, the Ignatian meditation, it just basically involved like reading a passage from the Bible. Specifically, we were going through the Gospels, and something that would be very scenic, so that then we would break off and turn off our microphones and videos and do a visualization, just our own private meditation, visualizing ourselves into the scene of the story that my friend would have just read to all of us, and determining who we were in that situation and what we saw, what we felt, you know, really trying to get all of the five senses in play. So beyond just visualizing, like really immersing yourself into it, and then just meditating from there. And I would have such transcendent experiences with it. By far, I was the weirdest one of the group. Everyone else stayed pretty well in keeping with the narrative of the gospel story, where I would be like, and then Jesus pulled a widget out of his hair and he didn't know what it was for, but he said someday we would know what this was for. I mean, I just had like weird things. Like there's this story where these demons go in, are like cast out of people and go into pigs, who then run over a cliff into the water, and then they drown. And like, that's not the crazy shit that I'm making up. That's from the Bible. That's from the Gospels. But in my mind, I saw the pigs go into the water, and then they burst like these pink bath bombs and made everything like glittery and cleansing, and like all the evil energy went away and the water was purified and it was pretty. So that's the weird places my mind would go. But no, seriously, I mean, I'm kind of joking around. There were some silly things, but like there were really profound things too, and things that I would always be hard pressed to put into words. Because it was just like, it was something I was experiencing, and I would do my best to verbalize it to the group after the fact, because we would regroup and share with each other what we saw. And it was so fascinating because everyone was coming at it in such different ways. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And everyone brought something to it, whether they were more learned in like the historical context of what was going on, or the theological context, or you've got someone like me who's just kind of winging it and jumping in with like my little mystical woo stuff going on, just letting my mind do its own free association of thought. It all like came together to like add layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of meaning to this same shared story that we all read together, but we all like saw it in such new, unique ways, and yet there was a unifying force to it all too. So I just found such power in the practice. It meant so much to me. Ultimately, after 5 years, I just decided to walk away because, well, first of all, my friend moved, so he's not leading them here anymore. He's in America now, in Oregon, and he's starting the practice there with people locally, which is very exciting. But like for me too, I just felt like it wasn't coming to me like it used to, and I feel like there's some other way I'm supposed to channel this and get these messages now for a time, and I'm sure I'll come back to it at some point. But anyway, that was just another way that I found myself coming back to the faith I was raised in, I guess, like coming back to these stories, but again, like without the gatekeeper. That Ignatian meditation was just another way, yet another way of engaging with that and finding the meaning in myself. And so in conjunction with readings like Mary Magdalene revealed, the Way of the Rose, and other things that I was absorbing at the time, it just seemed like it was all coming together at the same time, and hearing it from different places, and like it was just meant to be. And it just like opened my eyes to this new understanding of how it works, of just like that divinity within, and that we can access it, you know, right here. You don't need someone out there. It's good to have a guide, a teacher, but like we have it here too. That gateway is right there. We're our own gatekeeper, so we can open that latch for ourselves anytime that we want to. That's just been, you know, my more current way of seeing it. And so anyways, I have continued, now that I've been back, I'm still listening to the Pray 40 through the Hallow app each day through Lent, and observing it that way, because again, it's just a practice I moved to do. I think there's something beautiful about Lent. There's something deeply meaningful about Easter, and I like holding on to some of these traditions. And so I don't mind coloring in the lines a little bit again when it comes to these big moments for Catholicism. But again, I do my own kind of cherry picking with it. And so there you have it. Whatever your beliefs, whatever you think about anything that I've talked about today, I'm grateful for you. I hope that you're doing well, and may peace be with you. Bye-bye.